Buddies, it's almost here. We're going to Jasper. It is the Jasper Pond Hockey Tournament. We were there last year, had a heck of a time. We're going back again. Shout out to our friends at Tourism Jasper, and it's presented by Booster Juice. Booster Juice. Now, space is limited for this tournament. It's going to be held at the Fairmont Jasper Park Lodge. It is beautiful. Nation Network going to be there. We got the Oilers guys and Leaf guys. We're going to have some fun. Edmonton plays Calgary on the Saturday night. We're all going to get together, watch it. Frank Seravalli's coming in from Philadelphia. We're going to have a fun time. You should get there. Space very limited. You can go to chehockey.com to get more information. Maybe you can get a team in there. But by all means, follow along on social media as we'll be doing our thing. The Jasper Pond Hockey Tournament, fueled by Booster Juice. Download the new Booster Rewards app today. Start earning berry points for delicious and nutritious smoothies, drinks, and food that'll get you through the day. It's the new year, right? Everybody's doing the New Year's resolution thing. Being healthy. Be healthy with Booster Juice.
Friends, there's a great line from the objectively perfect motion picture Bull Durham that tees up the situation very aptly. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, sometimes it rains. And this was arguably the third category for the Calgary Flames. Their fourth game of a 4-game road trip, their fifth game in 8 days in 5 different cities with travel. And it was the type of game that even if the Flames were playing particularly great, it would have been kind of a slog for everyone involved to get through. And unfortunately, playing against the 31st best team in the National Hockey League, missing 9 regular players and playing what could very charitably be described as a hardscrabble group of Rockford Ice Hogs and the NHLers who are left from whoever's been injured in Chicago, the Flames lost a 4-3 decision to the Chicago Blackhawks to close out their road trip. I believe this stretches their losses to Chicago in such situations to infinity games. It just seems like a situation where they always seem to lose in, unfortunately, for everyone involved. And here we are in the aftermath, here to pick the bones. I'm Ryan Pike from FlamesNation.ca. I'm joined by a familiar and unfamiliar face to many of you, Kent Wilson. For those of you who aren't familiar with Kent or his work, first of all, I'm sorry that you weren't on the internet before 2019. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Kent was actually, he's in a lot of ways sort of a pioneer of sorts. And I'm going to say that to make him feel old. A pioneer of sorts of sort of internet coverage of the National Hockey League. He was, I believe, Kent, jump in and correct me if I get any of these details wrong. He was originally the founding editor of Matchstick and Gasoline, the SB Nation blog that they launched eons ago. He was the first person that they conned into being managing editor of Flames Nation in 2009 before he conned other people into doing it for him. He was one of the voices that launched the Athletics NHL vertical. He was I believe, the first voice hired for the Calgary site there, which our friend Julie McKenzie currently is the main voice on. And now he's gone legit of sorts. He's somehow conned his way into writing for a newspaper.
Yep. So the long con. It only took about 20 years.
And for those of you, I personally owe a lot to Kent. He plucked me from the obscurity of our comment section and somehow let me write things relatively unedited, and somehow we didn't get sued into oblivion. And so, now here we are.
Wild West.
Yeah, I mean, it's the wild, back in the days where we were anonymous, we could do whatever we want. And now we're, semi-respectable figures. And we figured what better time to bring Kent on. When we roped him into joining us, we did not know it would be initially a Chicago afternoon game, but sometimes it rains, folks. Kent, what did you make of this one? Because this felt like I made yesterday when Cammy and I were on together. I mentioned that game kind of felt like 2 games where the Flames were pretty good for the first half, and then it seemed like they tailed off. They were really good at 5-on-5 against Philadelphia and very ungood on special teams. This one, it felt like the Flames sort of had it together until they got the lead, and then Chicago went, okay, we're winning on you now, and the Flames didn't really seem to have any way to sort of stop the bleeding.
Yeah, I didn't like the first 5 minutes or so. They looked sluggish, but as you say, and the rest of the first period, I thought they were the much better team, and I was like, okay, well, this is a game you should be winning. Despite this would have been a scheduled loss if this was like Colorado or something, but given the opposition, it's like, okay, well, you tilted the ice, you look good. But you're right, the second period became a slog. Everything slowed down, and the Flames kind of lost their legs, and you saw the details just go out the window after that.
Yeah, and we'll get into this as we move along in the program, but the Flames, I don't think it's unfair to say the Flames don't have any game breakers. I'm pretty sure if we went into that locker room, the United Center, and say, do you guys have anybody that can steal a game? They'd say maybe their goalies. But in terms of skaters, they don't really have anyone that can, really, lean on a game and say, I'm taking this over. They don't have any Gaudreaus or Kachucks or arguably even Monahan. So they kind of have to do it by committee. And this is the type of game where you could sort of see the Flames were, the tank was a little bit empty because they were pushing and pushing and pushing. But the Flames' entire system relies on speed, execution, and movement. And the execution wasn't really there. And sometimes if the execution's there, but you have speed and movement, you can get by. But it seemed like one by one, speed, execution, and movement all kind of went by the wayside for a big chunk of, especially that second period. And that's what you get, right?
Yeah, you also need to execute on the details when you're a by committee kind of team, right? You can't have the giveaways that we saw in the neutral ice and their own zone. They had a lot of hard time breaking out, I found too. But yeah, it just became really slow and really sloppy. And I think a lot of that was probably being tired, but they're also a mediocre team, unfortunately. So sometimes, some nights, that's what you get.
Yeah, I think if you're one of the stats nerds, like a couple of us are here, the Flames, I think based on National Stat Trick special sauce of expected goals for, the Flames enter the game like 15th in
Yeah.
expected goals for. So they're by definition sort of an average team, a middle of the road team. And their special teams, they scored a power play goal today. They did some good things, and we'll get into that momentarily. But it just felt like they just didn't have anything in the tank to really overcome a Chicago team. And as much as we want to dunk on Chicago, and rightfully so. I mean, it's if you came into this going like, hot damn, Flames are playing against a Connor Bedardless Chicago, they were just going to be ready to lay down and say, okay, just take the points already. But I'll give Chicago credit. They played a pretty solid home game. They kept it really simple. I don't think they did anything particularly fancy, but you give extra ice time to someone like Colin Blackwell, who's a pretty underrated player. He's a player that I think a lot of contending teams would love to have on their third line. And unfortunately for Chicago, because of the aforementioned 9 missing regulars, he's on their first line. But I think he made the most of his opportunities. Phil Kurashev was really good. They got some decent goaltending from Peter Mrazek. I mean, there was, I would argue, more good than bad for Chicago, and probably more bad than good for the Flames. And that's probably why we're having this conversation right now.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it is about Chicago. When they were good, the Flames had a lot of trouble beating them. That makes sense. Now that they're really bad, the Flames have a lot of trouble beating them. There seems to be something about a curse in Chicago because technically all the losses they had against the Blackhawks last year are the reason they didn't make the playoffs. So
my theory is the guys in the Flames secretly just really love Chelsea Dagger and just want to keep hearing it, and they heard it quite a bit today. Let's get into some of the positives, and we'll swing over to the Betway highlight of the game for our gambling partners our betting partners at Betway. Where's my ad read? So the highlight of the night, a highlight of the game brought by our gaming partner Betway, and it is the first goal of the game, the one that counted. The Flames had an earlier one that got wiped out because Lindholm made too much contact with a goalie.
Murphy, bumped down low by Pospisil. Kadri gets it in front for Zary. Pospisil feeds it over. Hannafin, they score! Kadri from Hannafin. The tap in for number 91.
And this was basically the type of goal that the Calgary Flames have been pretty good at scoring this year. It's a dump in, and then they just put some pressure on. First guy in is Pospisil, and it seems like they create a bit of havoc. They got the puck moving, and you put some bodies in the slot. You get a defenseman pinching to make a nice little play, and it's the type of goal we've seen quite a bit of from especially the Kadri line since Pospisil and Connor Zary came up. But that's the type of goal the Flames need to play. I don't know if you'd call that a high skill goal necessarily, but it's the type of goal where the Flames simply got in there and executed and outworked the other team and got rewarded for it.
It's also one of the only goals that didn't go in off of someone's leg today, so that helps make it a nice highlight.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's the kind of thing I think, Kadri generally had a pretty good game. I mean, it's the type of game where when you lose 4-3 to the 31st best team, I know folks aren't going to be exactly planning a parade or extolling the virtues of a lot of guys in red and white, but I thought, Kadri offensively was pretty effective. Very quietly, Jonathan Huberdeau had a couple assists in this game. I believe he got an assist on Andrew Mangiapane's power play goal, and he got an assist on Kadri's second goal, the one that went in on a bad angle on Mrazek, because I don't think Mrazek thought he was going to shoot it in that situation. But yeah, it's just
no, I didn't either. I saw it. It's like, okay, well, it went in at least.
Yeah, it was one of those games where, I think if the Flames had the jam to sort of execute on more of these types of plays where they're able to sort of make those type of passes in really close quarters, it might have had a better result for them. But like you said, I think you hit the nail on the head. For both teams, there was a lot of passes. I mean, heck, the goal that Andrew Mangiapane scored to take the lead early in the second period went in off a defender. It was a basically, by definition, a missed pass because it didn't get to the guy he was trying to get to. But there was a lot of that. I mean, there was a bit of miscues on both sides. It was that kind of a weird game, and Chicago was the team that made the most of their passes. So, I mean, I don't know what you can do. Like if you're the Flames, Kent, do you take this game and go, oh, we got to learn stuff from this, or do you just chalk it up to, wasn't your day, wasn't your game? You got to just burn the tape and get ready for Ottawa.
I mean, at this point, if they're still looking at the playoffs, they got to be better every game, period. Because I think they have to play north of 600 hockey to even have a chance moving forward. So games like this, end of a road trip, AHL level opponent, I don't think you take much from it. I mean, you're right. Some of the lines did have good performances. I like the Backlund line through most of the game. The Kadri line had a couple. I mean, nobody had a perfectly clean game given the way it went, but there were some, noteworthy performances. So it's like more of that and less of giveaways in your own end when trying to exit the zone.
Anyway, that was the highlight of the game presented by Betway. Get the Betway app on your phone. Bet the responsible way with Betway. And Kent, as we delve into it, I'm just kind of curious from your perspective. I mean, let's say they bring you into the coach's room, and after security finishes roughing you up, they actually let you speak. Can you learn a lot from this game? I mean, I know it's a simple, I guess, a knee-jerk response to go, they look tired, they weren't very good. I mean, to a certain extent, I think, I was talking to someone else via text during the game, just mentioning the idea of, every team. I mean, I threw it on social and I got a couple snarky replies back, which I love you commenters, never change. The idea of, like, this is a crappy part of the schedule. You can't dress it up any way, shape, or form. They played on New Year's Eve, and since then they've traveled. They play every other game. This was a back-to-back. They're back at home to play Ottawa. They're on the road again, play 2 more games on the road, then they're back at home again. Like, this is a lot of travel. This is the meat of the schedule. Nobody's 100%. But on the other hand, everybody, I bet you if you go through every other team's schedule and you look at it and go, okay, where's their crappy part of the schedule? Every single team in the National Hockey League has a stretch like this where you just scratch your head and wonder where the hell the schedule maker came up with this stuff. And as much as everyone in the league is at the mercy of the schedule maker, and I think, you're going to, if you talk to 32 NHL clubs, you'll have 32 versions of people being pretty disappointed with stretches of their schedule based on logistics. But this is the comment I made in our post-game recap was, this is the type of game that teams that make the playoffs tend to win. If you're, when your schedule is crappy and everyone's tired, maybe guys are sick or hurt or whatever, good teams that make the playoffs find ways to win these types of games where the bounces don't go their way and your power play or PK isn't really feeling it. And, maybe something squeaks through your goalie. Like, it just seems to me that, this is the Flames are kind of what they are. And this game is kind of a reflection of what they are. And that, they didn't play their best game, and they just didn't have anything or anyone that was able to elevate to the point to steal this one for them.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, there's no game breakers on this roster. If you have a McKinnon, if you have a McDavid, if you have a Gaudreau even or a Kachuk, that's the sort of roster that they're going to feast on, even if they're tired. So the Flames don't have that. They don't have. I've said they don't necessarily have a core at this point anymore. It's an organization looking for a new core for a new era. So they're in that sort of interstitial period where things like this are going to happen because they are a middle of the road team. This is a middle of the road roster. I mean, you can look at today and take some things that are working. The back line since Mangiapane's gone back there, I think 88's looked a lot better than he did in December. Huberdeau is now a point per game player since he's been elevated with Lindholm. You got to start looking for those little wins and what they might mean moving forward for this team, even if it's just pumping up asset value to kick off a rebuild.
Well, you got it. You mentioned Huberdeau, and I'll ask you because I know you've recently written about the Huberdeau of it all. It's been no secret since Michael Backlund's been a regular NHLer. You can put one of your dogs with Michael Backlund, and they look NHL ready because he's very good at doing a lot of things. I'd say I put Blake Coleman in that same category where if you have anything in your lineup like the squeaky wheel, you could put on the left side of those two guys and they'd be pretty good. But I'm curious what you think, because I've noticed, I think that the details in Huberdeau's game since he moved off that line, since he got elevated, I think are a lot better and a little bit more finely tuned. And I think that might be one of the reasons why he's doing as well as he did. Like you put Backlund, we saw last year Huberdeau with Backlund, albeit on the wrong wing for a bunch of time. But, he was put on that line, I think, to sort of, he came off an injury last season. And I think they wanted to sort of teach him, here's sort of the ebbs and flows of the system. And here's the north-south of it all. And we're going to put you with our best north-south player, because if you're going to learn how to play whatever system you need to play, Michael Backlund's probably a pretty good guy to emulate. And I thought, especially this time, since he moved away from Backlund, the music between the notes, so to speak, of his game has been a lot more fluid than it was before. What do you think? Have you seen things that you like about Huberdeau since he moved away?
Yeah, it really looked like Backlund and Coleman were babysitting him a little bit in December, especially when the puck wasn't going in. It looked like a guy without a role, honestly, on a line. We know what Backlund and Coleman can do, and if they're with Mangiapane, that they could be a head-to-head power versus power kind of group, because they do that dump it in, puck retrieval, board play. That they're fantastic cycle line, right? And when you get Huberdeau in there, he definitely did his best. I'm not one of those people who condemns Huberdeau for his level of effort, at least, and he always seems to be trying hard, but there was no connection with that line. But now you see him starting to execute on the things that are supposed to make Huberdeau a special player. The pass on the Lindholm goal that was called back was a special pass. And when you start seeing more of those connecting, that player's starting to feel a bit more comfortable, more like himself. So, and that's part of the reason I actually predicted on our Discord server that I have a community that Huberdeau is going to be a point per game player in the latter half of the season. Because I didn't think, 1 point in 12 games or whatever it was in December was gonna continue indefinitely.
Yeah, and I think I think the phrase that Huberdeau used at exit interview day last year was pretty apt. It's not like he forgot how to play hockey, but I think having the ability to sort of watch him in person and see all of his shifts 40 odd times a year, I think with him the big challenge was his details in the offensive zone were very good, but in the last 10 feet, last 15 feet before the net, he just found ways to not get pucks to guys. And part of that was probably just not being familiar with guys, not being familiar with the flows of the system, or when guys are going to go for changes or things like that. But he seems like he's thinking a lot less on the ice and trying a lot more stuff like he did in the first period on that. I agree with you. It was a really good pass. It's kind of a shame. I mean, it got overturned and it should have been. It was definitely goalie.
It was the right call. Yeah.
But it's still an amazing pass. No one's saying anything about the pass.
No.
So yeah, I don't know if I'm as bullish as you are in terms of point per game, but he's definitely, I think there's definitely going to be more contributions from Huberdeau. And, I think it's just a question of, can he become even 80% of the guy he was 2 years ago, or even 60%? Like Huberdeau at 60 or 70% of a 115-point player. I mean, he had the type of swagger with the puck that makes opposition defenders sort of back off a bit and go, okay, let's not look silly here. Let's just not let him get around us. But when you have that kind of swagger, it gives you that extra space to operate. It's almost the opposite of Gaudreau, where guys played Gaudreau close because they didn't want him to just blow past them speed-wise, but because they played him close, it opened up space for everybody else. So I'm really curious how the Flames continue to work with him and how they can adjust to open up some room for him, because he's, when he's on his game, when he's got that chip on his shoulder, he can be a really special player. And they didn't trade for him because they thought he sucked. They traded for him because they thought he was pretty good. Even as he ages, I don't think this part really fades over time. Maybe your foot speed or your hand speed doesn't really respond as quickly, but it's not like you're going to suddenly flip a switch and forget how to do things. So let's move into Hungry for More, presented by DoorDash. With restaurants, grocery, pharmacies, bakeries, flower shops, and more, DoorDash really has everything you need. Don't worry about cooking dinner or running to the store. Let it all come to you with DoorDash. For a limited time, our listeners can get 25% off and 0 delivery fees on their first order of $15 or more when you download the DoorDash app and enter the code NATION25. Again, as you see on the screen, NATION25. Kent, so this segment is, we talk about things that we're hungry for more of, or alternately, if you want to do the inverse of that, things that we're hungry for the opposite of. So I'll let you tee off since you're our guest here. What are you hungry for more of?
It's a perfect segue, because I was going to bring up Huberdeau, because he was, back on the power play. He'd been kind of taken off the power play altogether. He's playing sort of a first line sort of role now. And the piece that I wrote a couple of weeks ago on Huberdeau that appeared in the Calgary Herald was all about, this player and this organization, they have to figure it out, because they are in a marriage with golden handshakes on golden handcuffs on each other. I mean, they are not, there's no, trading Huberdeau tomorrow. There's no buying him out. This is a long-term relationship. So they have to figure out what works for the player. And it feels like maybe they're on that path, rather than, having him babysat by two of the best two-way players on the team, or, playing him with Lucic last year, just bumping him around the lineup going, you'd figure it out. So I want to see more of Huberdeau, playing 60% ozone starts, playing on a first line, playing on the power play, playing 23 minutes a night, get him back to, 60, 70 point player if you can.
I'll chime in with mine, and this is nothing against the gentleman who played the third pair this afternoon. I think they would be admitting that they didn't have a great game. We had in the first Chicago goal, poor Nick DeSimone's kind of bites on a play by Colin Blackwell in the offensive zone, and it was a good play by Blackwell. Like I would have looked a lot worse than Nick DeSimone did. But just the idea of you're in the last game of a road trip and you're kind of leaning on your depth guys a bit, and DeSimone just did not have a good game. I thought Australia was slightly better, but neither of them I think are really going to be putting this game full of clips on their Norris Trophy for your consideration reels at all. It was just not a great game. And I think Dennis Gilbert is very quietly becoming both a fan favorite and a really reliable sixth defenseman. I don't think he's a 5 quite yet, but I mean, for a guy that you gave up literally nothing to get, he was a free agent signing, I think, because the Flames saw his work in the Chicago, or in both Chicago and the Colorado organizations, I believe, and kind of like what they saw. He was pretty good in big chunks last year for the Wranglers and for the NHL club. And, he's had some really good offensive success this year, and he's just been really reliable. And, we always talk about how the fourth line has been sort of, for lack of a better term, the whatever is left of the Flames lineup.
Yeah.
The third pairing has sort of fallen by the wayside in that way too, especially with, there's no more Nikita Zadorov. The Flames currently don't have Oliver Shillington, although he is skating with the Wranglers now, and, knock on wood, maybe we get to see him in a game soon. But losing guys really tests your defensive depth and really forces them to lean on Gilbert probably more than they anticipated. But he's been really good, and you're hoping, I don't think it's the secret to say that he suffered some manner of an upper body injury against Nashville, and evidently he's doing better. So I'm just hoping that Dennis Gilbert is back soon. I don't know how soon, but he's quietly becoming a really, really valuable player for them, just in terms of filling a role that's kind of a tough role to fill on a team that doesn't have a lot of depth. And we talk about potentially the idea of, should the Flames trade AJ Greer, or should they keep AJ Greer? Because AJ Greer fits a need that the Flames have been sort of scrambling to find. And I put Dennis Gilbert kind of in the same category as I put AJ Greer, where they're really low risk, low cost, reliable players. And if a team comes to the Flames and says, hey, we'll give you a 4th round pick or a 3rd round pick for either of those guys, I think you might as well trade them, because it gives them a chance to play into the spring and it gives the Flames some assets back. But if you told me that the Flames are thinking about maybe re-upping Greer or Gilbert for a year at, sub $1 million, like $800,000, $850 for a year, just to be reliable 4th line, 3rd pair guys to mentor and transition some of these guys from the farm team, could AJ Greer teach Adam Klapka to be a solid National Hockey League player? Sure. Could Dennis Gilbert play the side beside Ilya Solovyov and be a really reliable partner for him for a year or two? Yeah. And you need those guys. If you're be trading guys above Gilbert in the rotation to get big assets potentially, you kind of need to keep some guys to fill out the roster. And so that's my long way of saying I'm a fan of Dennis Gilbert, the way he conducts himself, the way he plays, and I'm hoping that he's feeling better soon, because he's playing well, and I think folks would like to see him continue to play well.
Yeah, I've actually been a fan of most of those guys that have come up, except for Osterley. I could see less of him, to tell you the truth. But Solovyov, I'd like to see him back on the parent club at some point. I thought he started to actually get his legs a little bit after the first couple of games where he struggled. So yeah, it'd be nice to, I think Gilbert should probably be out for a while, given he's got a history of concussions, and that probably looked like another one. So for his health, I'm hoping they don't rush him back. But yeah, all those guys aside from Osterley have been, pleasant surprises, honestly.
Agreed. This has been Hungry for More, brought to you by DoorDash. Remember, that's 25% off, up to $10 value, and 0 delivery fees on your first order when you download the DoorDash app in the App Store and enter the code NATION25. Offer valid in Canada, subject to change. Terms apply. Dash that for the win. And so, Kent, we're gonna go into a quick break. So, folks, coming up, we're gonna have more discussion. And before we say goodbye, we'll dive into the questions, the comments. So, if you're in the chat, please like, B, subscribe, and C, give us your comments and your questions, because we're gonna have some time at the end of that. So, we'll be back in a couple minutes.
Greta, it's our home away from home for Afterburner. We'll be there for live watch parties throughout the season. Should be your spot regardless. Before, during, and after the game, grab a cocktail, something from the menu, let the games begin, or maybe you get into the game yourself. Over 50 arcade games from vintage to state-of-the-art. Load up some credits on that Greta game card of yours and get at it. Greta Calgary, located at 213 10th Avenue Southwest. Check them out online, gretabar.com. Wendy's is letting you win real food with your fantasy teams this year with the Wendy's Daily Face-Off Survivor Pool. For those of you who smoked the competition, Wendy's is rewarding you with weekly prizes that'll have you winning despite your lack of team-building skills. Sign up to play the Daily Face-Off Survivor Pool to win weekly prizes like the spicy chicken sandwich from Wendy's and the Wendy's app. Charm Diamond Centers, proudly Canadian owned and operated since 1972. More than 85 locations across the country through Charm and their sister brands. Get custom ring building delivered in less than 4 weeks with the Charm Masterpiece program and an unbeatable pricing policy. The holidays are here, can you tell? It's the perfect time to check out a large selection of Canadian lab-grown diamonds, mined diamonds, and don't pay until 2025 with their instant in-store financing OAC. For more information, go online, charmdiamondcenters.com.
BK Beaufort Liquor is a proud sponsor of Afterburner. In fact, our very first sponsor ever, right back to our first Afterburner ever. Big thank you to Mandeep, Manjeet, and Jazz. Huge Flames fans, a heck of a family. Good-looking cashier, Mandeep, as well. Find them right across from Winsport on the Trans-Canada Highway. Whether you're grabbing some beer for your place in town or you're heading to the mountains, make sure you stop in, say hello. Whether it's a specialty wine, liquor, six-pack of beer, whatever it is, check it out and grab it at BK Beaufort Liquor.
And we're back. If you haven't been, just a cheap plug for Mandeep and the folks at BK Beaufort Liquor. The nice thing is there's a Starbucks next door. So if you don't want to have someone following you around and sort of judging you for your purchases, send them to the Starbucks to get you something. And then I did that with me and the wife, and I left with an arm full of beer. So it was a good time had by all. Let's head into the road ahead for our friends at Village Honda. Village Honda, where they have new in-stock inventory on ground. Start your automotive adventures at Village Honda, where new vehicle pricing is MSRP. They're at the Northwest Auto Mall and online at villagehonda.com. The Flames have, we mentioned off the hop, the Flames have had a fairly torrid schedule, lots of games, lots of travel. That ain't changing for the foreseeable future. The nice thing is it gets a little bit more spaced out. The Flames are back at home on Tuesday evening for a one-off home game to play the powerhouse Ottawa Senators. And then they are back on the road. Our friends, on the other show, the Barn Burner boys are on their Barn Burner vacation to Arizona. They get to go. Some of these schlubs never went to school, Kent. These guys are going to school. They're going to Arizona State to check out the Arizona State Coyotes on Thursday night. And then the Flames continue on to Vegas to play in a building where they always do great. T-Mobile Arena off the Las Vegas Strip to play the Golden Knights, and then they're back at home. And again, the first team they face back at home, they can't escape them, the Arizona Coyotes. On one hand, the schedule is what the schedule is. We talked extensively on the site in this venue about what we called the Gauntlet Run, where they had 15 games leading up to Christmas, where they played some really good teams. The only quote unquote bad team they played was Minnesota, coming off of firing their coach, and John Hines has turned them into a really tough out. The Flames were north of 500 on that gauntlet run. And, I'm just really curious how the Flames continue to manage things, because, after the Vegas game, they have a couple days off. And then I think we settle into sort of a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday schedule until the All-Star break, which is kind of nice because, folks get Sunday to do real life things, walk the dogs, do some laundry, pretend to be functional human beings. But it's also, this is going to be kind of, I think, a test for a club that has sort of been, the consistency factor has been a challenge for the Flames throughout the season. I'd say arguably into last season too, pretty much since that loss to Edmonton in the second round. It's sort of been, a couple wins and then a couple losses and a couple wins and a couple losses. And I think the optimists in the crowd were probably look at this road trip going, okay, outside of Philadelphia, winnable, probably 4 winnable games, at least 3 winnable games. Maybe they can come home above 500. They come home a game below 500. And now we sort of play that game again where, okay, can the Flames get back to 500? Can they go on a run? Can they get some daylight? Because, as much as, Kent, you know me, I'm a terminal optimist. I always think they'll probably, the Flames will do their best. But I also, if you're being an optimist and if you're on team playoffs versus team playoffs, friends, if you're doing the math here, the calendar is going to start to work against them, because I think they got they played 40, they got 42 left. I think they have to have 93 points or thereabouts to have a realistic chance to make the playoffs based on what the Athletics Dauntless Session has forecast. I think Money Puck and other sites sort of have a similar ballpark. Some are a couple points lower, a couple points higher. But Ken, how do they get to? Can they get to 93 points?
Maybe. I wouldn't bet a lot of money on it, to tell you the truth. I think the issue for this team and management is they're going to have to make a decision before that point. They're getting into decision time here with so many pending unrestricted free agents. You got Hanifin, Lindholm. You got a lot of guys you can sell at the deadline, and I don't think you can cross your fingers and hope for that 93-point team unless they start winning 4 to 5 games pretty consistently here over the next little while. I'm team rebuild. You're team optimist, but I've been team rebuild for a while now, and I think it's getting to the point, unless something changes quite drastically, where reality has to be faced, because you can't lose a bunch of guys as unrestricted free agents for nothing and miss the playoffs this year. That would be an absolute catastrophe for this organization.
And for me, I've always had the All-Star break as sort of the, okay, you got a week, think about what you're doing and where you are. Because I think if you're a Flames fan, I think you kind of want to know what their direction is at that point. I mean, I'll say this, the Ryan Leslie had Don Maloney on at the first intermission, and Don Maloney, he didn't really say a lot. I feel bad for anyone in management doing any type of media at this point, because I don't really expect. I've seen some folks are, running to the hills with some of the comments he made, and I'll just say this: I don't really know what you expect him to say in that situation. You'd think, I think it'd be almost more alarming if he went, "Well, Ryan, the team's not very good. We're selling off everything." And I don't think they believe that. I think they do. Like they acquire the players that they have right now because they believe in their potential, and for whatever reason, the potential they've shown hasn't really manifested the way they thought it would. And I've always said, I think you kind of knew what you had the first month of the season, where the old coach was gone, you had a new group, everyone was feeling good, and then you go out and you just spend a month finding ways to lose. And the guys that you were hoping would be like, if you're, I'm not going to pick on particular players because I think that's kind of unfair, but the guys that you were hoping would jump out and say, "Look at me, you should give me $1 billion," didn't really do that. I mean, if you look at Johnny Gaudreau in his contract year was fantastic. Matthew Tkachuk, fantastic. They've had a lot of players. Even you could even make sense for Eric Branson in his contract year. For what Eric Branson was asked to do, Eric Branson was fantastic in that role. And so you kind of want players to basically play their way into a larger tax bracket. That's you always want to be feeling like you're having a bunch of players that are underpaid for what they're giving you. You want to get surplus value. And unfortunately, I don't think the Flames have gotten surplus value from a lot of the big guns, or a lot of guys that they were hoping would be big guns. And so I think even if, you look back to their play since Connor Zary came up on November 1st, the Flames are sort of they've won about half their games. And so that's kind of what this group might be. They're good enough to sort of hang around, but I don't know if they're good enough to do a heck of a lot more than that. And especially, if you look at now, they have 9 games left till the All-Star break. And from a point to the center standpoint, I think they have something like 3 or 4 or 5 teams between them and a wild card spot. So they have a lot of teams to climb over. And I think it might be a lot to expect a team that's sort of been walling around the 500 mark, even when they've been, if you just wipe out October and say that doesn't count. Without October, there's still about a 550, 560 team, and you need to be 6 something or other to make the playoffs most likely. And if what they are is sort of a 560-ish team, maybe it is probably time to take a hard look at some of the pieces they have. So, I don't know, Kent. I don't have any of the answers here. This has sort of been,
No.
It probably feels like Statler and Waldorf, the 2 old Muppets from the Muppet Show, sitting up in the balcony going, these jokes are terrible. But, I don't think the jokes are terrible. I just think right now it's the type, I think they've taken this group almost as far as they can be taken. And, if you take out objectively a first line's worth of high-end talent and everyone's sort of slotted a level above perhaps where they should be, this is kind of what you get. So I don't think it's anybody's fault. It's just the reality of the situation.
Yeah, the bet that Treliving made was that Huberdeau would come in and be a superstar here, replace Gaudreau or Tkachuk, and then Kadri would come in and fill the other gap. And that hasn't happened. It was a gamble. It was a Hail Mary. It was intercepted. It's kind of been run back for a touchdown, if you ask me. So they are what they are. There's still a lot of good players on this team, good players, and pretty good players. There's no great players on this team. There's no superstars. So even if, let's say, they did the near impossible, made the playoffs, they would be first round fodder, honestly. who are they going to overcome? I mean, they had a lot of problems getting past the first or second round with Gaudreau in town and Kachuk in town. Now, they don't have those players anymore, and they don't have anyone who's a facsimile of those players anymore. It's going to be a tough go. So they are what they are. They're a middling team. I like a lot of the guys that are still on the team, but it's the path that they're on now is a tough one if your North Star is making the playoffs. And at some point, I think the North Star has to be building a contender again.
Yeah, and if the idea is, between that, they have a new building opening in July, September 2027, and I think if you're prognosticating it, it's probably a hope that they be a pretty notable team by then. Because if you're the Flames, if you have the choice between if you have to get 6 playoff home games, would you rather have them be every year for 2 games and then you're done, or would you rather have them in 1 year? Because we've been starting to do some legwork on some retrospective stuff we're doing for the 2004 Cup run. I think they made a lot of fans in that one run. The Flames went from being a curiosity, both in this market and nationwide, to being a pretty exciting, fun group that people fell in love with. And you don't fall in love with a team with losing in 5 games to Vegas. You fall in love with a team with some kind of a magical run. And, could the team that they have put together right now do that? Maybe. I think it'd be a big ask because they don't really have a Kiprusoff or an Iginla to hang their hat on. But, Iginla wasn't Iginla until 2000, really. And that 2000-2001 season, 2001-02 season, that sort of 2-year stretch where he went from being a pretty good player to being one of the best players in the world. And they didn't have Mika Kiprusoff at all until November of 2003. So, I mean, things can turn pretty quick if you have sort of the pieces around to slot around them properly. And I think right now they have a lot of interesting pieces. And, I'm kind of bullish on their drafting. I think they've done a nice job sort of filling the ranks. I think they're a little bit thin on defense, but, they got a goaltender playing down the hall that they're really high on. They have, Matt Coronado is really good. Honzik had a pretty good World Juniors. They have a lot of guys, I think, that people in hockey ops are big fans of, and well deservedly so. I think a lot of those guys have sort of done those kind of things. And who's going to be next Connor Zary, who sort of gets a chance and sort of rather than sort of be put on the 4th line and get told figure it out, get sort of put in a position that really maximizes the skill set. Because I think they've done a really nice job setting up the young guys they brought in for success. And Coronado was sort of, I think, a victim of them not really having the entire team really figured out in October. But I think the way, if you're using, if your litmus test for how the Flames are going to handle some of their young players going forward and integrate them is Zary and Pospisil, I think there's reasons to be optimistic about it.
Yeah, and I think all the guys that you noted there, all the young players, that's a really good cohort that would be coming up that would surround a superstar. Like if you had that next era-defining talent, the Iginla, the Gaudreau, in the organization right now, you'd be super happy to have Peltier and Zary and Pospisil and Honzik and Coronado. Yeah, I mean, Coronado's hitting the cover off the ball in the AHL this year. That's great. You just got to find that guy. And if I'm in the front office right now, that's become my top priority. Like, okay, we're a good team now. We're probably not going to be a great team. Not on the current path we're on. How to become a great team? We need a great player, and we probably need to draft that player.
I agree. This has been the look ahead for Village Honda. Village Honda has a huge selection of used vehicles, all makes, all models for all budgets. With over 70 units on site and access to over 400 more in their dealer group, make Village Honda your one-stop automotive destination in Calgary. They're definitely worth the trip. Village Honda is located in the Northwest Auto Mall. And Kent, we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back with all of your questions. Stay tuned.
Derek Newman of Newman Deems Real Estate Group with CIR Realty are proud sponsors of Afterburner. Born and raised in Calgary, Derek not only loves talking sports, golfing, but he's an avid sports fan. He's happy to talk sports or real estate with you. Complimentary in-house staging consultations, finding home not on the market. If you're buying for the first time or a seasoned seller of homes, chat with Derek and he'll help you achieve your goals. If you're interested in buying or selling in the greater Calgary area, call Derek or text him at 403-619-6661 and let Derek put his network to work for you. That's Derek Newman for Newman Dean's Real Estate Group with CIR Realty.
We are well into the winter months now, and you can feel it, can't you? That urge to get away. Maybe some beach time to warm up those bones of yours, maybe a hockey, sports kind of road trip. Well, when you pack your bags, make sure you don't forget Alberta Blue Cross. There's only one thing better than sharing memories, and that's making new ones. Alberta Blue Cross Travel Insurance protects your memories and more, wherever travel takes you. Visit ab.bluecross.ca/travel for more information. Alberta Blue Cross, celebrating life's memorable moments inspired by hockey.
It's hockey season. Get ready to cheer on your favorite teams with us at the Stage Bar at the Grey Eagle Resort and Casino. Enjoy the game on one of their huge, large screens with friends, drinks, and delicious food. Let's go. Visit GreyEagleResortandCasino.ca for more information. How about this information? Happy hour. Doesn't get much happier than this. 3 hours of happy hour. Let's make the most of the day and your afternoons with great drinks and food. Join us at the Stage Bar and Blaze Bar and Grill for the new happy hour. Every day, 2 till 5. Great food, specialty drinks, all starting at $5. Visit GreyEagleResortandCasino.ca for more information.
And we're back. So, Kent, I don't know how well you know Jack, but Jack is in our comment section curating some great questions for us and also harassing people to like and subscribe. And if you know someone that might be into any of the stuff we're doing here, send him a link, bug him, get him to try us out. Maybe they'll have fun. Maybe they'll hate us, but try it out. Hate watches count the same as love watches at this point.
That's right.
And we're heading to the lean point of the season, so we'll have some fun on these post games as much as we can muster. Depending on the results, some of these bottles behind me will start looking a little bit emptier as this season goes on. I saw some of you last episode chirp me about my bottles being full. I'm saving them.
Fair enough.
This is the best industry in the world because if you're working from home, you can just Irish up your coffee a bit for the post games. What have we got in the questions, Jack? Ooh, here's one. Kent.
Yeah.
So what we'll do is I'll read the questions, you respond first, and I'll go.
Okay.
All right. This is from the Firefox 4 Cubed. That's a great name. If the Flames are willing to swallow 50% of his remaining salary, what would a reasonable package for the Leafs to offer the Flames be for Markstrom?
Good question. I like that this was asked too, because my next column that's coming up is about trading Markstrom, and I do mention the Leafs. So I don't consider them the best trade partner for Calgary because they have cap issues. They don't have the best sort of futures package they put together. But I would be asking for a first round pick and at least a prospect from them, especially if the Flames are eating some of the salary. What do you think?
I'm kind of the same mode because I think, for lack of a better term, the boring answer is, he's got a no move and he'll probably want to stick around. And, you'd probably find a buyer for Dan Vladar in the offseason. Then you go with Markstrom and Wolf next year. I mean, that makes sense to me. But I mean, I think, they have a lot of respect for Jacob Markstrom. He's a very important player for the team. And, you sit down with him and be like, listen, do you want to stick around? Like, if it's basically up to him. If he wants to go, I think they can figure out a way to facilitate it. But I wouldn't want to retain unless I'm getting a first or a second back because you're basically going to be burning one of your retention spots for 3 years.
Yeah, the ask is higher when you're eating some of the salary for sure.
All right. Next up. This is from Jesmeister. What happened to Dewar from last year? He fell off so quick.
I'd say this is probably more what Dewar really is. He had a nice little pop when he got on the team last year, but he always kind of profiled as a tweener at best, given his, what he did in the AHL and his career. He has nice tools. He's a big body. He can skate, which is, NHL coaches are always going to give you a chance, but he's never profiled as a guy with hands, even in the lower ranks. So I think this is probably more of what you're going to get from Walker Dewar at the NHL level.
Yeah, I mean, guy who spent nothing to get. He was an AHL level signing for out of college. Wasn't really a move the needle offensively guy in college. Even he's always been sort of a role guy, and he's a real good AHLer, and I think in spurts he's a pretty effective AHLer, but he's an energy guy, and maybe he just tops out as one of those guys that plays 3-4 years in the NHL as sort of a 30-40 game a guy or game year, and then he ends up in Germany or Switzerland. I mean, to be blunt, I mean, even the most mediocre NHLer is one of the top 900 guys, 1,000 guys in the world of this profession. And, he's earned his spot, I think, by merit. Can he keep his spot? Because he earned his spot when some of these guys were a little bit less polished who were coming up behind him. But, would you worry about punting him for a Pelche? Not, no question. You do it in a second. Or Klapka? Like, I think that's the challenge now. Can you get more high quality everyday minutes from some of these guys coming up? Because I think you kind of have an idea of what Walker Duehr is at the NHL level, but what's Ben Jones? What's Klapka? What's Emilio Peterson? What's any number of these guys? They have probably about a half dozen guys in the American League that I wouldn't mind getting a look at. And unfortunately, the easiest guy to take out of the lineup, as we've seen the last month or so right now, is Walker Duehr. So, I think my short answer is maybe he just found his level. Some guys just top out at being good fourth liners, and it's a tough. Regularly,
anyone who remembers Josh Juris, Walker Duehr is Josh Juris, right?
Spengler Cup participant Josh Juris. Yeah, I mean, I think as much as from an NHL perspective, it's easy to look at being like, oh, Josh Juris, what a disappointment. Josh Juris is one of the guys that played NHL games that probably dreamed of playing them, and now he's making a pretty damn good living in Europe. And the travel's a lot better in Europe than it is here. Money's not as good, but the travel's a lot better. So, I mean, Josh Juris is probably loving life right now. And good for him. I think, I don't think there's a lot of people who are going to say any bad things about Josh Juris because, he's living his dream right now. Good for him.
Yeah. It's not complicated. It's just, that's probably the player that they are. Each of those guys is, right? So.
Next up from Sean. Sean, I'm gonna mispronounce your last names. I was gonna say Sean. I apologize. I'm bad at names. I'm gonna say Emilio Peterson or Pedersen's name 3 different ways. That way, I'm always wrong.
I do that too.
Yeah. Do you or do you not re-sign Hanifin? I really like this question.
Me too, because I'm, as I said, team rebuild, and I absolutely do not re-sign Hanifin. And it's no comment on the player. I mean, he's kind of a microcosm of the team that it is now. He's a pretty good player, but he's not a star. He doesn't have gravitational pull, and you don't even necessarily have to be a star for that. I mean, Michael Backlund has gravitational pull. You can put him on a line and he anchors it, and he makes players around him better. He doesn't score great. That's why he's not a star, but Hanifin always seems to be comfortable when he's the second best person in the pairing that he's in. He's a pretty good top 4 defenseman, but he's not a great one, and he's turning 27 at the end of the month. He's going to ask for 6, 7, 8 years, as long as he can possibly get from Calgary. I don't think you want to be committing $7 million plus to a player like that, especially for the next 2 to 5 years. You're not going to be competing meaningfully anyways, in my mind. So I would auction him off aggressively.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I really like him as a player, but is he your ace? I don't know if he's the ace. He's not playing on either power play unit. He's a good to very good all situations player. He's reliable, but he's not a difference maker. And I think that's the challenge. I think Pierre LeBrun over at The Athletic, I think the number he floated out was, I think the term he used was, quote, close to $60 million was the extension on the table when both sides got cold feet. And I think that was the end of October where the Flames reportedly put a moratorium on ongoing negotiations with their UFAs. Because I think both player and team need to figure out what the hell they're doing here. And I think that's the big challenge, because, if you're someone who's going, here's the thing. If you punt on Noah Hanifin, you're hoping to find a Noah Hanifin in the draft. And you'd be very happy if you found a Noah Hanifin level defenseman in any round of the draft. and it'll be a challenge. Statistically speaking, it's not a guarantee. It's, you're just hoping against hope you find someone who can be that good. But the idea is you don't want to be paying Noah Hannafin upwards of $7 million for 2 or 3 years where the team isn't really doing a heck of a lot. If you think, Noah Hannafin, re-signing Noah Hannafin is the, it's the trading for Jonathan Huberdeau kind of move. It's the signing Nazem Kadri kind of move. You sign Nazem Kadri for 7 years and $7 million a year if you think you're a Nazem Kadri away from doing something special. Because I would put Nazem Kadri sort of as the Ford equivalent of a Hannafin, where I don't know if Nazem Kadri is a complete world beater, difference maker type, but he's really, really good. And if Nazem Kadri is their second best center, you're looking at your depth chart and going, we're pretty good. We got a chance. If Nazem Kadri is your best center, you're looking at your depth chart going, we got some work to do. And I think the challenge is right now, Noah Hannafin, depending on the night, is often the Flames' best defenseman. And, that probably makes it tougher to get rid of him. But I think it also sort of shows that maybe you want to, regroup for a bit and come up with that. I also think that, the fact that you have Weegar, who can do a lot of the similar things and be an all situations guy, and arguably is a little bit better as an all situations guy than Hannafin, makes punting on Hannafin a little bit more palatable. You still have, after this season, Rasmus Anderson for 2 more years. So I would lean towards no, because, based on where it feels like they are in their trajectory as a team, maybe you don't want to put the resources into retaining him at this point in time. 2 years ago, I would have had a completely different answer. If he was a UFA 2 years ago, you look at the group you have and go, you got a Gaudreau, you got a Tkachuk, you got a Monahan, screw it, go for it. But when you don't have those pieces, it's a little bit tougher to be as enthusiastic about it.
Yeah, Hannafin's a great gap filler if you're going into a contention window. He's that guy who can bump down maybe someone who's over his head on your second pairing or something. He's that guy who can complete the picture, but he's not the guy you build around when you're going into a rebuild. You don't want to be paying 32-year-old Noah Hannafin $7.5 million 5 years down the road when you're starting to do this again, when you're starting to come back up. That is not a good use of cap space probably down the road. So for me, if I was management, I'm not too concerned with filling that role over the next couple of years because I don't think I'm contending anyways.
Okay, since we're on the subject, Ken, let's just say they do it. Let's just say they throw their hands up and be like, okay, we don't want to go nuts looking for Noah Hannafin in the draft. We have a Noah Hannafin. Let's just hold on to him. What number would it have to be at or under for you to go, okay, I guess? I think term would be the killer on this one, but I'm just curious, is there a cap number that you would feel less uncomfortable? I'm not going to say comfortable, but less uncomfortable with.
5.5, and that's pretty unreasonable, I'm aware, but I'd be happy with that because he then is still a good trade asset for a team that should probably be looking to trade someone like that in the next few years. So if you assign him to a good number, that's an unreasonably good cap number, then you can probably trade him easily. It gets harder, I think, once you're north of 7 for sure.
Yeah, and I don't know if he's going to say. I don't think he's going to say yes to anything south of 6.5 or 6.75 at this point.
I wouldn't if I was him.
That was a good question. Thanks, Sean.
Yeah.
What else we got? This is from Trevor Mintz, whose name I think I got right. What's up with Dubé? Can we package him in a trade with someone else like Tanev or Hannafin?
I mean, yeah, but I don't know what's up with Dubé. He's always been kind of a middling player that needed to be in the right circumstances. He has some tools. He's got that speed. He up until this year, he could score to some degree, but he's just stepped off the cliff for some reason. He can't do anything at this point. And as you said, the fourth line's kind of an island of misfit toys right now. They don't seem to do anything particularly well. There's no chemistry with any of them. If you want to throw Dubé into a trade, do it. I don't know if it gets you anything extra at this point. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he's found his level. I mean, at some, he's always been sort of an up and down player. And also, I think, he's sort of, I would make some parallels between him and Sam Bennett in terms of when Bennett was here, he was a winger on the top 6 or top 9, and then he was a center, and then he was a winger again. And I think the problem with Dubé is, I mean, as much as, he's the type of kid that will, we've talked to him about this in the past, just saying, do you care where you play? And he's very much loves to play, loves the game, help do whatever it takes to help the team kind of guy. But at a certain point, you kind of need to know, here's your role, here's your niche. Like, I'll say that, like, Chris Tanev is fantastic because Chris Tanev figured out very early on the tools and the role that best suited Chris Tanev, and he was able to make a career out of it. I mean, Chris Tanev might not be the most skilled player in the National Hockey League, but in terms of doing what he does and doing it well and not trying to do things he's not great at, he's very good. I put Blake Coleman in that sort of category too, where Blake Coleman is exceptional at the 6 things that Blake Coleman is asked to do consistently. And there's a world of things that he doesn't do, but I think both him and the coaching staff are smart enough to not put him in those situations, so he just doesn't get exposed. And I think the problem with Dubé is he's sort of thrown wherever they need a guy to sort of fill in gaps. And as a result, he's never really developed that speciality that I think players kind of need to develop to be high-end players at a certain level. So he feels to me, Kent, like, you know, there's plenty of teams that have defensemen. There's sort of quad A defensemen or third pairing guys that sort of hit their ceiling. The Flames potentially will be without at least 1 or 2 more of their regular defensemen come the trade deadline, most likely. He feels like the type of guy that maybe you do it now, maybe you do the draft, but you move potentially Dubé to a team with less forward depth and more defensive depth, and you get a guy that can help you with depth issues on your blue line. Because, you know, is he a bad player? Oh, heck no. He's got a lot of tools. And I think that's one of the reasons why people are still enthusiastic about him at times. But he's also the kind of guy that I think, you know, I think he's found his ceiling here. And then it's just a question of, can another organization give him some chances to be something new?
Yeah, the big issue for Dubé, even coming into this year, is he's never been a play driver, and he's always been pretty bad defensively. So that really puts a ceiling on it. Once you go up the rotation, you're facing other really good players, so you can't be miserable defensively unless you're absolutely elite offensively, which he isn't. He was always just good, pretty good. So he needs a very specific role to be something in the NHL. He's probably a third liner. He's probably needs to be sheltered, and there probably needs to be someone else on that line who's better than him. And if you have that very specific sort of thing going with Dubé, he might be okay. But this year he's fallen down the rotation. He can't really fit on any of the other lines, and the fourth line isn't working for him at all.
What else we got? Jacob, Travis, what's the temp with the media around the Dome? Is there a feeling that this team could be going in a new direction?
You're going to have to take this one.
Yeah. So I would say that's a good question. What's the best way to phrase this? I think there's so speaking for myself, I think there's a certain amount of optimism because, you know, I wrote a column right after New Year's that just sort of talked about how consequential and important the next few months are going to be for the Flames. You're going to see, you know, one way or the other, you're going to know the direction of the Flames as of the trade deadline. And, you know, you're more likely than not, you're going to see some change, some new faces. You know, I'd say since 2003, you know, you saw the Flames built in the image of Daryl Sutter. And then from about 2014 onward, you saw the Flames built in the image of what Brad Treliving thought a hockey club should be, for better or for worse. And I think the cool thing now is, you know, Craig Conroy will get a chance to sort of put his stamp on the team. And, you know, knowing Craig a little bit, I think he sees the team in a lot of ways differently than Brad did. I think there's going to be an emphasis on sort of bringing some young faces in, which we've already seen. And I think we're going to see a continuation of that. You potentially, you know, I'd be shocked if we don't see Jacob Pelche in a Flame sweater before the end of the season. I mean, once he's healthy, I think he gets a fortnight in the AHL just to knock the rust off. But he's a guy that they basically had him penciled into the NHL roster from the get-go before he got hurt because he's really, really good. And he has that kind of skill set that you can put him in a lot of places. I would say, you know, I would phrase Jacob Pelche potentially as sort of a high-end Paul Byron type, where you can basically put Paul Byron before he got hurt and had to retire. You can put him on any line and he'd be able to adapt his skill set for that role. I think Pelche is that kind of versatility in a player. And I think that's something they don't have a lot of. And I think that'd make him a really valuable, useful player for them. And I think we're going to see, you know, potentially, you know, some openings for defensemen. I think we're going to see faces here, like new faces from outside of the organization that we might not have anticipated, because I think we're all operating on sort of the same kind of perception that in a lot of ways, in terms of trades and in terms of roster construction, Craig is going to operate in a similar way to Brad. I don't think that's the case, but I also don't know what to expect because I've been, I've been working under, covering a GM for 9 years. So I've sort of been conditioned and trained mentally to think, okay, here's the type of trade I would expect based on 9 years of history. So from that perspective, I'm excited because I think we're going to learn new things about, Craig as a manager. And I think we're going to learn new things about, the Flames organization, because there's a lot of good young people who haven't really gotten a chance. And I think a lot of them are going to have a chance to do a lot of interesting things in situations they weren't used to. And also the parking lots north of the Saddle Dome are going to turn into a big hole. And that's going to be fun because then they have to fill the hole with an arena. And as someone who's been writing about the arena since bloody Calgary Next, I'm kind of excited about that. So I think it's a long way of saying, I don't think I can't speak for my colleagues in the media, and they wouldn't want me to, and I, as much like I wouldn't want to speak I wouldn't want them to speak for me, but I don't think I'm alone in sort of having a little bit of optimism about the new of it all, because I think we're all kind of used to how things are and how things have been. And that's, it's not to say that it was bad. It was, they won 2 division titles. They had 2 extremely good regular season teams that for whatever reason just couldn't turn the corner in the playoffs. But, new is always kind of fun to cover because we're going to learn things about the team, about the game, about various things that we didn't know before. And I think, when you're covering a team day to day, something new, seeing something you haven't seen before, seeing something that makes you go, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, it's kind of cool. It turns a kind of a boring game in February or March potentially to something fun because you feel you get a little bit of enthusiasm in your writing. And that's my rant for today.
All right.
What else we got? Ooh, KQ asks, question: future of Lindy.
I think the future of Lindy is to be traded at the deadline, and then to re-sign for $6 to $7 million a year, maybe 8, given what Horvat got, and have a good rest of career.
What do you think Lindholm is at this point? I mean, he's good. No one's saying he's not good. He, last year I think he got a few Selke votes, not as many as Michael Backlund, but he got some Selke votes. Like he's a guy who's sort of earned a reputation as a good two-way player, and he's definitely got some offensive upside because we've seen that in the past. But do you think he can drive a line on his own, or is he a high-end complimentary player? Like where do you see him?
The latter. I've looked at his numbers since Gaudreau and Tkachuk left, and he's closer to the Lindholm that he was in Carolina than he was with Gaudreau. Like he did have a couple superstar years when he's riding shotgun with 13, but that's kind of gone away. He's a very good player. He doesn't have gravitational pull. Let's put it that way. If he's riding shotgun, if he's put into a roster where there are superstars either around him or above him, you're happy with Lindholm. But yeah, I think you mentioned earlier, the team was hoping, once they got onto this experiment of a new contention window, that Lindholm would continue to be the star that you saw with Gaudreau and Tkachuk, but he's not. And it's nothing against that player. I mean, that's a hard echelon to live up to. He's a very good player. He's not an elite player.
Yeah, not to pile on, I'll say this. When in the run up to Johnny Gaudreau becoming an unrestricted free agent, Brad Treliving used the phrase, to paraphrase, whatever it takes. Like they were basically saying, they love the player and were, they didn't have a lot of caution about throwing a crap ton of money at Johnny Gaudreau because they felt that Johnny Gaudreau had shown the ability to be a play driver, to be a difference maker, to be a guy that if your team needs a goal and to force overtime or to win a game, you'd always throw 13 out and you'd expect to see something interesting. And I would say the same kind of thing would be in the case for Matthew Tkachuk. I mean, I think they were bummed when he decided to seek employment elsewhere, to say the least. But I think they got it to a certain extent. But I think he was another guy. I think the two of them, I think there were two players that they were, enthusiastic about paying what needed to be paid to retain the player, because, they felt that with them on the team, they slotted really well. And those guys were drivers and difference makers and could anchor lines or be put on a power line themselves and just overpower the opposition. And we saw that happen for a couple of years. They were an exceptionally good line. Unfortunately,
one of the best lines in the league.
Yeah, and unfortunately, for better or for worse, like, they've given Elias Lindholm a lot of leash to sort of be a guy that can carry a line, to be a difference maker, to drag, to be blunt, lesser players with him to wherever they need to go. And it just hasn't turned out the way I think anyone really hoped it would. I think the Flames are hoping that, I think they were hoping that Elias Lindholm would have the kind of season that made them feel enthusiastic about throwing stupid amounts of money at him, because he would be so good that they'd have to be crazy not to keep him. And I think, the player dictated the situation with his play, and I don't think it turned out the way either of them really wanted to.
No.
So that's a long way of saying I think he'll be wearing another sweater come March 9th.
Absolutely.
Gary Mooney asked, how much more evidence does this management need to completely dismantle this team? I'm gonna jump in with a caveat. Okay, I think they have enough guys that want to be in Calgary for the long haul and or are on contracts that will be prohibitive to move or get out from under, that I don't think they're not gonna be San Jose bad, for lack of a better term, with the guys they have and the guys they either don't want to move, can't move, or don't want to be moved. If Nazem Kadri wants to be here for the long haul, barring his game completely falling off a cliff, I think he's good enough and he does enough things that the team will, with him and Huberdeau and potentially Markstrom and Weegar and Anderson, I think they have enough good players that they're going to slot some young guys in around. But I don't think the team is going to they're not going to go full Chicago. They're not going to go full Edmonton. They're not going to go full San Jose. I don't think they can. I just don't think it's possible with the types of players they have locked in. And now Kent completely contradict me.
No, you're right. I mean, that is also the way this organization operates. They almost never do the full teardown. The last time they kind of did it was Iginla at the trade deadline, came up to them and said, trade me, that type of thing, not going to resign. So they were kind of forced into it. But even then, shortly thereafter, you didn't see them. They went out and tried to sign Brad Richards in the offseason not too long after that. They don't like to do the full teardown. I don't think they're going to do it. And you're right. It's not like they're going to turn around and trade Kadri tomorrow. They can't trade Huberdeau, at least not right now. Weegar's probably here for the long term. So it's, unless they bottom out horrendously, unless something happens and they do a San Jose is not going to be done purposely. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And I think they see the math similarly to a lot of folks. I think probably in the back of their minds, some part of them is hoping against hope that maybe they can go on a run. Maybe they can go on a run. Who knows? But I also think that, asking a team that has sort of floated around 500, or even, again, throwing out October, a 550-ish team to suddenly become a 650-ish team for 2-3 months, I think that's a tall order, and I think they know that. But I think the fact that they decided to, in October, the fact that, they took arguably the organization's top prospect, Matt Coronado, decided, okay, this ain't really working, let's do something different, and brought up Connor Zary and Martin Pospisil. They sent Dryden Hunt down. I think they've been pretty good at sort of making some smart moves on the fly that have improved the team and, making adjustments to things that aren't working. So, I don't think Flames management is completely in the dark in terms of where things are trending, but I also think, they're a group that's going to need to, they're going to need to have some luck at the draft to get to where they want to go. And I think, that might be kind of a long process. And I'll say this, I mean, it was brought up, I think Pinder brought it up on Barnburner this week. I mean, be careful what you wish for. If you're wishing for full teardown, one, the hockey's awful. when the team sucks. I mean, some games are just, you're with the old saying, some nights you're painting a barn and not painting a Picasso. Some games, like I remember covering this team in 2013-14, and it was some long nights at the office. It was just kind of a slog for fans, media, players, everyone involved. And some teams just never get out of that slog. I mean, how many years have we been, we're going to see the Ottawa Senators on Tuesday night. Ottawa has been kind of bad for a while. Buffalo has been kind of bad for a while. Detroit may finally be getting out from being bad for a while. Being bad is easy. Getting out from being bad can be tough, especially, if you're used to being on the wrong side of some one-sided games. It can wear on you, and it can actually cause players to regress. So, yeah.
What they can't do, though, is lose a bunch of these guys, like hope for a playoff spot, not get it, or a miracle happens, they get it, they get run out of the rink in the first round, and then lose a bunch of these guys. Like, they can't do that again. That is a non-starter. So, make some decisions, start building up your futures, and go from there, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. They got the big four free agents, Tanev, my brain is Hanifin and Lindholm.
Yeah.
So they got three guys. Do you feel like would you, Kent, be disappointed if any of them is still on? Like, do you feel like they need to pull the ripcord and punt on all three of them? Are there?
Yes. No.
That's a clear answer. Good.
Yeah.
Because I just think if you tell me, hey, we really like AJ Greery, fits the need. Now we don't have to go out and find some guys to fill out the fourth line. You can probably live without the fourth round you get for him. Like, you'd probably love to have an extra pick, but you could probably live without it. If you keep Dennis Gilbert instead of trading him to wherever, you can probably live with that. I think there's some of the sort of middle or bottom of the rotation moves that you don't make. I think you can justify by going, when the team is bad and it doesn't have much in the farm system. I mean, I covered a trade deadline where the main move they made was, I think Jay Feature came out and mentioned that they got a bunch of interest in Tim Jackman, and then they just re-signed Tim Jackman. And that's when the team, A, had no farm system to speak of, and B, really could have used the pick. And then, there was interest in Tim Jackman, and, not to slag on Tim Jackman. Tim Jackman was a really good depth role guy that you probably could have gotten something for. But if in the situation they're in, I think they have enough depth that if you don't punt on your depth guys for depth picks, I think you're probably okay. But I think it would send the wrong message to not punt on the pieces that they can get significant assets for. I think Hanifin of the three might be the one you can justify keeping the most. I don't know if it's a strong justification based on the conversation we've had. But, the other two guys are north of 30, and probably they're going to hit their declining years in terms of assets soon. And, we saw the Flames hold on arguably too long on Jerome McGinley because they felt that he was a difference maker, and with him on the team, they had a chance. And yeah, okay, I can, if you want to tell me that was the plan, and until Jerome decided that he wanted to try somewhere else, okay, I'm fine with that. I don't love the plan, but at least it seems like a decent plan. But I don't know if you have anyone on your roster right now that you can say the same thing about.
No, absolutely.
And I think Kent's in the dark now.
Yeah, it's gotten progressively darker in this room.
As has Kent's mood.
No, I'm always like this.
What else we got, Jack? Anything else?
That's it. That's all for the questions, guys.
Beautiful.
All right.
Well, this has been Afterburner for Sunday, January 7th. 4-3 loss to the Chicago Blackhawks to finish a road trip. The Flames now have a record of 17, 18, and 5. They're back in action on Tuesday evening when they host the Ottawa Senators. Barnburner will be back bright and early on Monday morning, 10 a.m. I don't know what they're doing in the show. They never tell me, and I don't want to know because I like to be surprised. Kent, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Kent left the site in September 2017 to go work at Parts Unknown. And since then, I think we've been basically haranguing him off and on for the better part of a half decade to get him to, just stop in, hang out. So I'm glad we were able to do this. And, my understanding is Kent won't be a stranger throughout the rest of the season. So you'll be able to see him intermittently on these post-game shows to liven things up a bit with his jovial and cheerful nature. Hopefully he'll have better. I don't know if I kind of like this bad lighting. It kind of makes you look spooky.
Well, you can be sure that I'll continue to bang the drum about rebuild. So if you're on team rebuild, wait for me to be on, and we'll keep making the case that that's what they should do.
Yeah, you can catch Kent's work, I believe, once a week. I believe it's every Monday on the Herald website, or
Monday or Tuesday.
Is it in the newspaper? Do you have a newspaper still?
I believe it is in the newspaper because I have a word count, so I got to try to hit that every time. So I usually do that for inches, right?
Word count. That just sounds ridiculous. I just fill my space with GIFs and hope that no one really notices the plan I'm using.
It's the new world, right?
So you can always take a look at Kent's stuff on Post Media, both in print and on their newfangled website. He's also on Twitter at, I believe, Kent_Wilson.
That's right.
I got it right. And we'll be back on Tuesday with Afterburner. Don't know who's hosting. It's a surprise to me. And Barn Burner, the boys, will be back on Monday. And then don't forget they're on the road starting Wednesday, where hopefully they come back alive from the desert. Otherwise, I have to reschedule a lot of things and fill in some gaps because we got some sponsors that are very nice to us, and we like to provide them with a show. And so Jack and I are both hoping that everyone returns from the desert alive and well, and we don't need to call in any favors. So with that, we'll bid you adieu. For Kent, I'm Ryan. Thanks very much for joining us, and we'll see you on the YouTubes in the future.
That's right.